Hey, happy Hanukkah to everybody. There's an interesting concept I'd like to point out. Many people are aware, of course, Hanukkah. We all know that we light one candle on the first day, two on the second, three on the third, until finally on the eighth day, we're lighting all 8 candles. And of course, there's a classic question which was asked, and many people in the Talmud and other sources answer that, and that was, if the miracle was that they found one jar of pure oil which was able to be lit because the other bottles had become contaminated, so why is it a miracle of 8 days? Really, it should be a miracle of 7 days because there was enough oil in that jar for the first day. So one of the classic answers, of course, is, well, since they knew the process was going to be 8 days until there would be more oil, better it should burn a little every day, and so they divided it into eighths. And the miracle was that each eighth actually burnt for the full day. On another level, however, which is even more curious, is that it comes to teach us something much deeper. And that is, in fact, they put the full jar in on the first day, and we would say that's not a miracle. And so therefore our sages come along and tell us, no, even the fact that oil burns is a miracle. In other words, even nature is a miracle. And this is hinted at by an amazing story in the Talmud. A young girl comes to her father, who was a famous rabbi, and says, "Father, we have no oil for lighting the Shabbat candles." And he says to her, "No problem, why don't you use vinegar?" And she says, "But Dad, everybody knows that vinegar can't burn." And he answers, "The same God that makes oil burn will make vinegar burn." Now, obviously, if you and I try to burn vinegar, it's not going to burn. But if a person is able to penetrate through the facade of the laws of nature and find God in everything, such as this individual, then in fact it's a real core belief that the only reason that oil burns is because God wills it to be. Therefore, if God were to will vinegar to burn, it would also burn. So therefore, the miracle is not just to understand that which we call miracle, but even in nature is miracle. This is hinted at actually in the Star of David. The Star of David is one triangle which is on a higher level representing heaven, trying to take spiritual concepts and permeate it into the physical world. The other level is earth, trying to elevate it to something spiritual. But these two levels, the highest level is to realize, as the Maharal explains, that there's nothing miraculous about miracle. Miracle is natural. And conversely, there's nothing natural about nature. Nature is miraculous. And that's really the story, to teach us that Hanukkah has both the miracle, as we understand it, burning which couldn't be burnt, and the miracle of even burning that which could be burned. Now, there is an interesting catch here, and that is that the school of Shammai comes along and says we actually do the opposite. According to him, they burn 8 candles on the first day, and they diminish it, so that by the 8th day, you're actually only burning 1 candle. So the question is, how could Shammai, who says we go from 8 to 1, and Hillel, which is what we do, go from 1 to 8, how could, as the Talmud says, how could these both be an expression of the will of God? It seems very contradictory. You have one going this way and one going that way. Well, the answer is, when you look at a circle, you see that the circle is really going in one direction. When you isolate just the top of the circle, that part of the circle is going this way. When you isolate the bottom, it's going that way. But it's really all going in the same direction. So Shammai is a different approach. Shammai's approach is about heaven. How does that spiritual capacity of the infinite, represented by the number 8, how does that 8 come down into this world? And that's what it represents, taking that number 8 all the way through the various levels of creation until it finally finds one candle down here on the ground. And that's why Shammai compares himself to the bulls that were offered on Sukkah, which is also 8 days. That on those bulls, there were 70 bulls that were brought representing all the nations of the world. And their numbers of how they were divided diminished, so that the most amount of these offers were on the first day and the fewest were on the last. What's the correlation of the 8 days of Hanukkah and the 8 days of Sukkah? The answer is that Hanukkah brings the light into this world, and Sukkah represents the finalization of spirituality among all the nations of the world, unifying together in the third temple of Jerusalem, which will not be a Jewish temple. It will be God's temple for all people to pray together as one.